Hi, welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abbasi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And today, what came to mind for a topic is what other people's faith in us or belief in us, what role that plays in our own self-talk, and how my self-talk that tells me I can't do it seems to be louder than other people telling me that I can do it. And I was wondering where that negative self-talk comes from. So yesterday I talked about thought spirals and how we start going into, I make a mistake at work and then I end up thinking my whole career is falling apart. I'm going to get fired. Um, well, I'm thinking, great. We've got some techniques from yesterday on how to address that, how to notice, there it is. I'm having some self-talk. Let me stop it now and journal it out or whatever technique you prefer so that I can stop the spiral. But what I'm thinking about today is why is that self-talk, that spiraling negative? Why does it always seem to go in the negative direction? And I seem to recall talking about this tendency to think negatively instead of positively. But man, that episode must have been over a year and a half ago. So I don't remember which episode it was. But I wanted to think about that today. Why does my self-talk really almost, I heard this morning, sabotage my ability to be happy? Any progress that I might be making in my life, I can completely make it just stop, you know? I can make it start turning in the negative direction even. And why is that? Where does my negative self-talk come from? Um, I was thinking last night as I was working on chapter one of my memoir, I know, pat myself on the back. As I was writing it, I was thinking about my childhood, and I'm adamant that I had a loving childhood. I was not abused in any way, shape, or form. I was encouraged. I was loved. Um, so why was I always telling myself I don't have any friends? One thing that I was writing last night was, and this is why I said, why don't I have any friends? That was my negative self-talk that I remember from an early age. I remember, what did I say? I remember riding my bike one day and I guess I didn't have anybody to play with that day. So I loved riding my bike. And I went out to ride my bike on the sidewalks in this townhouse neighborhood that we lived in. And I was pretending like I was driving a car. And so when I would get to like an intersection where the sidewalks crossed, I would stop and look both ways, even though, I mean, I'm on a sidewalk where there's nobody around at all. But I would like stop, look both ways, and then I would make a turn. So I was pretending like I was driving. But I remember, as much as I was enjoying myself, I remember feeling self-pity. I remember feeling like this is what's the word? Like this is not humiliating, not embarrassing, but this is sad. What you're doing is sad that you're just out here by yourself pretending to drive a car while riding a bike because you don't have any friends. That's what I was thinking. That crossed my mind. And that I was very young at that time. Um, I'm sure I was in elementary school at that time. Yeah, it might have been right at the beginning of middle school, but I don't think so. I think I was in elementary school. Well, fast forward a little bit. I remember being in gym in the locker room in gym class, and I remember feeling very insecure about my body, which I think happens to a lot of us when we are introduced to the having to go into the locker room and change our clothes in front of people. It's difficult. I don't know if it is for everybody, but it was for me. I was embarrassed. Like I was not as pretty, or like my body was something to be embarrassed of. And thinking that I wasn't as good as everybody else. And then I remember being in gym class and feeling like, well, I probably am not going to be on the good team because I'm not one of the better ones. So I'll probably, and then fast forward more to, gosh, high school. I remember going to when I was a senior, we had like a senior party where we got to go to um this it's called Ida Lee in Leesburg. It's like a big facility where there's like a pool and gym and workout center and stuff, but it's like a community center-ish type thing. And we had like an all-night lock-in, I think it was called, and they had movies playing and treats and all kinds of stuff. And I think it was an effort to keep seniors from drinking and driving and that kind of thing. And I remember going and being so excited to go, but yet I found myself, I have this memory of sitting in this makeshift like, I don't know, it seemed like it was part of a car, like it was like a drive-in. So that's really created this environment that felt like a drive-in. I don't know why I remember that, but I remember sitting in one of these car-like things and feeling very lonely, like I didn't have any friends, like nobody's hanging out with me. And then I remember, let's fast forward to college. The first night I stayed at Longwood College, I took a walk. I think it was like the night, like freshmen get to stay there for a night and their parent can stay. And it's the first night that you get to meet your roommate and you stay in the room with your roommate and your mom stays in a room with another parent. Well, I remember going out. Um, for a walk, and I went and sat on a hill that overlooked the lacrosse field. And these lacrosse players were down there playing, practicing. I don't think it was a game, I think it was just a practice. And I remember sitting there and feeling this. What I wrote last night was this aching loneliness. I felt so lost. Um, like I was just cast out into the world all on my own and I had nothing. That's what I was feeling like that night. And I felt that way my first night when college actually started. And um, I wrote a letter that night because I was so lonely. I think I wrote a letter to my mom that night when my roommate was, I think she was reading or something, and I didn't like to read. So I used to write, my poetry and stuff. And I wrote some poetry, but I think I also wrote a letter to my mom. I was just so lonely and sad and just felt like I had nothing. Um, and then we're fast forwarding again. I remember when I was married to my first husband, my kid's father, and my son was about 2 years old and he was taking a nap. I think it was two or younger. And he was taking a nap and I was vacuuming and I liked to sing. It's something that I don't really do like I used to because I'm once again feel ashamed of it or don't think that I'm good enough to do that. I mean, why don't I sing when I'm alone or why don't I sing even when my husband is downstairs? I just don't do it anymore because I've grown into this some sort of like negative self-talk, whether it's embarrassment, just simply embarrassment. It stops me from doing things that I love. Anyway, my son was napping and I was singing the song I'll Take Care of You by the Dixie Chicks. And it was one of my favorite songs when my son was little because it really spoke to me about how I felt like it was just me and him against the world. Um, Even in that beginning part of my marriage, I felt like there was something wrong with my marriage and so I felt alone still. Um, so all of these examples led me to what I feel like was this low for my drinking. The one consistency that I was thinking about last night was that my self-talk got worse over the years, from being that young girl riding her bike, telling myself that I didn't have any friends, to sitting on that field watching the lacrosse game and feeling just aching like I was so alone in this gigantic world, to singing, it's just, I'll take care of you. It's just me and my son against the world. That negative self-talk, I can absolutely notice how it became increasingly negative and increasingly self-destructive. And the other consistency is when I was introduced to alcohol finally, which was like in middle school. I think I had a beer when I was in elementary school, but in middle school and so on throughout my life, the drinking became increasingly concerning over all of those years. Um, so I I can see how it progressed. I don't really know where it started, but we've talked about how do I make it stop in its tracks. And so today is really how do I actually turn the self-talk around? How do I turn self-pity into self-encouragement? Um, how do I turn that self-destructive, you know, as much as the more I felt alone, the more I isolated myself, right? It was the thoughts were encouraging the behavior. So what I find is, and I'm thinking about this out loud, which is why I do the podcast. When I started doing the next right thing, my thoughts started following my behavior. The It goes back to that, you lifetime listeners, you know, put a smile on your face and you'll feel a smile. A smile will eventually develop on the inside. It's doing the next right thing, and that my thinking naturally follows. It's not instantaneous and it's not even obvious a lot of times. The self-talk was so quiet in my head because I didn't talk about it. Um, Nobody knew I felt it. Why would I go upstairs and be like, Mom? I mean, I did tell my mom that I was bored. That was how I articulated my loneliness. I said that I was bored. And my mom encouraged me, I love you, Mom, encouraged me to learn how to be alone. It's important to learn how to be your own best friend. And I love that. I think that that is such a positive message. And I've tried to share that same message with, particularly with my daughter, because my son, unless he is more like me, where it's a quiet sense of loneliness that is not shared, my daughter more is, I can tell that she wants to be around people. And I have tried to encourage her to be able to be alone, to find ways to entertain ourselves. And I don't mean that by like get busy, but it's what I'm learning how to do in stroke recovery, to truly enjoy my own companionship. And I really have gotten to the point where I can do that. I mean, I have a good old time during the day. I tell myself jokes, I laugh sometimes just by myself because I'm just, I guess I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to my dogs, and sometimes we have a hoot as well. But this is how I've learned how to be happy with myself, to enjoy my own companionship. That started by doing the next right thing. That was the slogan that I learned in my sobriety that stuck. Um, that idea of waking up on a Saturday morning after I had been commuting 3 hours a day, working 8 hours a day, going to my AA meetings, going to IOP, that time in my life, those 10 weeks when I got out of detox, where I was so freaking exhausted. And I would wake up that Saturday morning and I would think, I don't want, and I knew I was thinking, getting ready to think, I don't want to go to a meeting. But before I let that come through my head and process it in order for it to affect my behavior and in turn not go to the meeting and not get up off of my hiney, I would stop it. I would stop the thought and do the next right thing. Take the action before I can let the thought complete inside my head. And it's kind of what I've done when that obsession for alcohol wanted to make a complete thought in my head. As soon as I felt it coming, I would stand up and I would go work on something like my flea market flip, or I would stand up and I would go for a run. It's doing the next right thing that eventually started to train my thinking into the next right thought, right? So, um, I think today, as I talk about this stuff out loud and I talk about all of these snapshots in my life where I felt so sad and alone, um, me articulating that to like my family, my mother and my brother and my sister in particularly because I was around them every day. And for me to actually say, this is what I was thinking, um, is probably bewildering to them. It's probably just, I had no idea that you were feeling this way. Well, yeah, that was the point. That was the point. I didn't want anybody to know that I was feeling that way because that self-destructive those self-destructive thoughts feed on themselves. And that is depression. That's what depression looks like in my life. And that's what chapter one is about in my memoir. It's about these invisible illnesses. Why are they invisible? Why is depression invisible? What's going on in there? And I want to talk about it out loud because I didn't talk about it for so freaking long. And that that idea of other people's faith in us being um, so impactful to our own faith in ourselves. I needed that encouragement when I got to my sobriety meetings for the first time. My fellowship played a gigantic role in me having the willingness to let my actions define my thoughts instead of my thoughts defining my actions. It gave me the faith in myself to do the next right thing, having faith that the next right thing will lead to the next right thought. Um, One thing that I was thinking of this morning is when we look at other people and how they look as though they're doing this whole life thing so courageously. And I wonder, do they even have negative self-talk? Well, I can assure myself, because I don't know it for a fact, maybe there are people out there who are just like, I have never thought anything negative about myself in my life. I just feel like I can do everything. I don't think that that's possible. I think that what people do, the people who look courageous, the people who become leaders in this world, I feel like they do it anyway. They take the action and then the thoughts follow. That's what I think is happening because that's what has happened for me. And when people say to me, you're so brave, you're so inspirational when you share these things on Facebook, for example. Um, I am trying to have my actions define my thoughts. If I do the next right thing, the next right thought will follow. Um, so that's my perspective on it today. My perspective changes changes on any given day, but that's what I'm thinking about. And I think that it's just important. I started off the episode about how the role that other people's faith plays in our own faith in ourselves. But I think what a takeaway is to just acknowledge like what we're saying to each other as humans among human beings. When we encourage each other, it's possible that it may be changing someone else's life. Because that's what happened for me. I started going to these meetings and I heard people talking about how it's possible, recovery is possible. And I got encouragement from that. I got direct encouragement from others. And it started to impact my decision maker, my wanter, my thinker, all of those little parts in me that I talk about as if they're organs. Um, it it took encouragement from others. It took others talking about how they do it in order for me to learn how to do it. So, I think it's something I want to keep in mind as I interact with other people. That encouragement, changes people's lives. So I want to be somebody like that. I want to nurture my relationships and provide that kind of impact so that other people can learn how to let action define thoughts in such a positive way. So, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.